So you probably know that teachers don't make an awful lot of money. However, for you, I'm willing to put my life savings at stake to show you the awesome power of understanding the physical and chemical properties of matter. So I am going to light this dollar bill on fire for your scientific enjoyment. All right, please notice the dollar bill did light on fire, but it did not burn up. You just witnessed a dollar bill being lit on fire, but not burning up. Now I'm going to tell you how you can reproduce this exact same lab demo at home safely as long as you have parent supervision, the right materials, and the safety equipment that you need. Here's how you would do it. First off, let me go over the materials that you'll need. You will need the chemicals that are at the heart of this demo that make it operate the way that it does. You need 70% isopropyl alcohol, and you're going to need about 70 milliliters of that substance. This can be purchased at any drugstore or supermarket. It also goes by the name rubbing alcohol, and you do want to be careful because you can buy 90% concentrated isopropyl alcohol as well. If you do have 90%, you just want to make sure you use a little extra water to dilute it. You'll probably want to only use 60 milliliters of the 90% isopropyl alcohol and 40 milliliters of the next substance, water. Tap water works just fine for this demo. And then you'll also need some table salt. That means sodium chloride, and if it's iodized, which means it contains the element iodine, that's fine. You'll need about 2 tablespoons of that. Then you're going to need a container to mix the substances in. In the science lab, I use a beaker. You would be just as well using a glass measuring cup so that you can measure the amounts of liquids that you add. Then you'll also need the dollar bill that you're going to light on fire and the matches to light it. Now, since we're talking about matches, I just want to mention the isopropyl alcohol is extremely flammable. You don't want to light the matches anywhere near where the isopropyl alcohol containers are. Be extremely cautious about that. I am going to mention that later in the lab procedures so you know to avoid making that mistake that could cause a lot of injury. In addition to these objects and substances, you will also need some utensils. You'll need a spoon to mix the substances together and a metal tongs to hold the dollar bill. Make sure that that metal tongs is metal far enough to the end of the tongs so that you can hold the flaming dollar bill and the flames won't reach any plastic or rubber that's on the tongs. You'll also need to wear laboratory splash goggles. Know where a fire extinguisher is nearby just in case. And you'll also need a glass or ceramic plate. A metal pan would also work to put underneath the flaming dollar to protect against dripping, burning alcohol. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. Now I just want to mention, it may be useful to also be wearing a lab apron and lab gloves for this. You don't necessarily need to, but it just provides a little extra hedge against fire. So if the fire does get out of control, there's a little protection for the skin on your hands and for your clothes. So it's advisable to wear a lab apron and gloves, but it's probably not 100% necessary. Some safety considerations for this lab. I mentioned how flammable isopropyl alcohol is. Never light a match when you're anywhere near the stuff. Make sure the container is far away from you. Also, you need to be careful of flaming alcohol dripping from the dollar bill. Make sure you keep something that won't burn underneath it. A glass, ceramic, or metal plate or pan of some kind. And then finally, since you're using glass in this lab, you just always want to be careful. Glass, when it breaks, can cause severe injuries, so treat the glass with respect. All right, how do you do this lab? First off, you're going to mix the 70 milliliters of rubbing alcohol with the 30 milliliters of water. This doesn't have to be an exact measurement, but you do want to make sure that it's close to those values, and that if you're going to make a mistake on either one of those substances, there's too much water and not enough alcohol. That will keep things safe for this lab. In addition, you're going to add your 2 tablespoons of salt, and then you're going to use the spoon to stir this thoroughly. After this has been stirred, you're going to notice that there's still some salt that doesn't dissolve in the bottom. If all of the salt dissolves, you probably want to actually add a little bit extra to the mixture. The salt is the part that gives the flame its orange color. Normally, rubbing alcohol burns sort of a bluish, clearish color, so when you light the bill, if it didn't have salt in it, first off, it would be difficult to see the flame, and secondly, it wouldn't look like a flame that people are used to. So you want to make sure there's plenty of salt in this mixture, and then you completely soak the dollar bill in the water, alcohol, and salt mixture. I usually take the spoon or the tongs and I sort of grind the dollar bill into the salt on the bottom to get plenty of salt coating on the dollar bill to make that flame nice and orange. Make sure the dollar bill is completely soaking wet and that it has soaked in plenty of the water in the alcohol water mixture. It should be completely soaked when you pull it out of the container. When you lift the dollar bill, just make sure you shake off any extra liquid so it's not dripping. You may want to just take your fingers and squeeze the outside. It is okay to touch rubbing alcohol, just make sure you wash your hands later. Then you want to carry the whole dollar bill and plate setup away from where your container of rubbing alcohol is. Away from the original container, the plastic container that contains the alcohol itself, and away from your measuring cup where you measured out the alcohol water mixture. Those should be nowhere nearby when you light the match. So I would go to either a different room or have them on an entirely separate table several feet away from where I am. Next, you're going to hold the soaked dollar bill with the tongs and then use the match to light the dollar bill on fire. You need to make sure that the plate stays underneath to catch any dripping, flaming alcohol that could fall. You may also want to do this over a hard floor surface instead of a carpet because you don't want to damage the carpet with flaming alcohol that falls down to the ground. And then finally, you should know that the flame should burn bright orange, very hot, and very quickly. It should be over pretty much in a flash. If the flame lingers, your dollar bill is on fire and you want to put it out as soon as possible. You can do that usually by just shaking the dollar bill or blowing it out like a birthday candle. However, you may just want to have a sink or a container of water nearby that if the dollar bill ignites, you can quickly just submerge it and smother the flame that way as well. At this point, I'm going to demonstrate how to do this one more time, showing you all of the steps that I would use to doing this lab. So I've gathered here the materials that I need in order to make this lab work. I have 70% isopropyl rubbing alcohol. I have a container filled with a little bit of water, at least 30 milliliters of water. And then I have iodized table salt. It's just regular sodium chloride salt. So what I'm going to do is take a beaker. You can also use a measuring cup. And I'm going to pour in, first of all, about 70 milliliters of my isopropyl alcohol. I'm going to estimate the amount just a little bit, but I'm going to make sure that there is more water than there is alcohol. But I'm going to make sure that if I do measure inexactly, I measure a little bit low on the alcohol side and a little bit high on the water side. So I'm going to set the alcohol aside, and now I'm going to add water to the mixture, about 30 milliliters of water. And again, I'm going to estimate just a little bit high, so there's a little extra water compared to the alcohol. Next, I'm going to add a generous amount of iodized salt. I'm going to add enough salt so that not all of it dissolves. About 2 tablespoons should do. And then I'm going to thoroughly mix this substance together. I'm using a glass stirring rod, but you can also use a spoon for this. The next step, once everything is thoroughly mixed, and you'll see there's still salt sitting on the bottom, the next step is to put your dollar bill into the solution and just completely submerge and soak it. And again, I usually grind it down into the salt to make sure there's a generous amount of salt on here for the color of this to be correct. Once you're convinced that your dollar bill is completely soaked with the alcohol solution and it has salt in the mix, the next step is to get ready to light it on fire. And to get ready, I'm going to take my isopropyl alcohol and move it to a completely different location so I know that it is nowhere near the open flame. When I take my dollar out, and I'm doing this over a surface that I can clean up, even if dripping, burning alcohol falls on the surface that I'm working on, it won't matter. You want to make sure that you have a plate beneath it to catch any dripping, burning alcohol. I'm going to pull the dollar out, and then I'm going to take the beaker of solution with isopropyl alcohol and move that to an entirely different location so this doesn't ignite. So now I just have my dollar bill soaked in the alcohol water solution. I'm going to take a match and light it. And then I'm going to light the bottom of the dollar bill on fire, and I should see a very quick orange flame develop that quickly goes out. If that flame persists, I'll just shake the bill a little bit to shake the rest of the flame out as I smother it with the air around it. And that is how you burn a dollar bill without actually burning the dollar bill.